Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. And this is the character of the initiation into the Egyptian mysteries by Frater Hans Guttner, F.R.C, Grand Master for France. An article taken from Rosicrucian Digest, Volume 11, Number 4, May 1933. The character of the initiation into the Egyptian mysteries by Frater Hans Guttner, F.R.C, Grand Master for France. Through all ages, the mysteries have always been marked by special characters representing a continuity in order to form a whole, and therein we can see the spiritual unfoldment of humanity. The essential of the initiation is the point of the soul's evolution for the epoch. As the soul finds a new world at each reincarnation, the principle of the mystery also changes, adapting itself to the period of the return to earth. Tempora mutantur et nos mutamur in illis. The teachings of the mysteries have been reserved until now to the privileged, to the initiate, and kept strictly secret from the laity. All the mysteries have this point in common. The adepts must possess certain intellectual and moral qualities and especially understand the esoteric significance of the expression finding oneself at the threshold of death. The study of the soul, the constitution of the human being, and the hidden laws of nature did mostly interest the ancient initiates, and those of modern times have faithfully followed the road which their highly respected predecessors have established for them. The masters of the past were conscious of how the different parts which constitute man are built up. They knew that the celestial bodies and certain spiritual forces contribute to that marvelous construction. Zarathustra, the great initiator of the very ancient Persia, already began to teach his disciples that light and solar heat, as well as the stars, have an important influence on the development of all kingdoms, vegetable, animal, and human. The Zarathustrian initiates were conscious that the forces coming from the cosmos and the earth act in unison. They felt the work of Ahura Mazda, and in discovering this secret, their souls were filled with joy and satisfaction. Impregnated with such a feeling, they could see the sun at midnight, a purely occult expression. The knowledge of the relation of humanity with the sun and the spiritual forces had been transferred by the Parsis to the Egyptians, whose souls had been previously prepared for the reception of such a teaching, which characterizes very distinctly their mysteries. The initiate of Egypt felt attuned with the solar force and was aware, concerning his different bodies, that man does not belong only to the earth, but forms one with the entire cosmos. In the very old times, humanity possessed a natural seership, and the same faculty still existed at the end of the Egyptian Chaldean epoch. When the Egyptian student looked at the starry firmament, he not only saw the physical stars, but also felt the spiritual beings connected with them. Those facts impressed much more the human soul than the sciences taught to us, or the consciousness in which we are living. As the souls of our days have pre-existed, they were surely incarnated also during the Egyptian Chaldean epoch. And those of the present time are supposed to have looked in the far past up to the zenith, have participated at the spiritual life and received certain impressions, which had become for them realities, but alas, today abandoned and forgotten. Nothing of all these experiences remains in the consciousness of the actual man. Everything which the souls have assimilated is inactive at the present moment, and the respective parts, physical and etheric bodies, are sleeping. If men would continue to live under the impulsion of the physical science, they would fall deeper and deeper into materialism and scatter themselves entirely, the souls having forgotten all the forces of the spiritual world which are necessary for the vivification of their vehicles. Notwithstanding, a great desire awakens in the soul moving on the superior plane. Man actually wants to know how the astral body and the ego are formed. A thick veil covers the secret to him, and he has the feeling which is expressed in the following words of an eminent Rosicrucian. That which is in you, that which you are yourself, is in darkness before the spiritual sight, but that which surrounds you when living in the physical world reveals itself entirely to you. The souls of antiquity had even passed through such an experience. But there was an absence of this desire when they traveled in the higher spheres, because there was no necessity for them to have a look within themselves. They were content with the satisfaction of knowing how the spiritual entities they had reached work at the construction of the physical and etheric bodies. At the present time, the same work continues to be done, but we are asking, what purpose has the building up of the physical, etheric, and astral bodies if we cannot understand what those vehicles hide to us? Therein we may find the difference in the soul's evolution of the present and the past. The experiences which marked the initiation of Zarathustra were taught by Hermes, but he introduced his disciples into the spiritual world by other means than those used by Zarathustra. We can divide the Egyptian initiation into two very distinct parts, that of very old Egypt, called the initiation of Isis, and the other of more modern times, or Osiris initiation. When the souls of primitive Egypt rose through initiation up to the superior spheres, they found themselves before the same phenomenon as happens today. They felt outside the physical and etheric bodies. They knew themselves in a spiritual world of facts and entities from whom they received real impressions. But at a certain moment of the initiation ceremonies, the soul had the feeling of having reached the goal of its journey, and further progression seemed to be impossible. And at this stop, the candidate passed through the experience, which we may illustrate by the following words addressed by the soul to itself. Whilst you have been led around with your sight in the spiritual world, you learn to take cognizance of the entities and the forces which have made up your physical and etheric bodies. You find yourself in the sanctum sanctorum. You enter the abode where you feel one with the entity which works in common with that which is in you and travels from one reincarnation to the other in order to remodel your astral body. Hermes shows us that this influence acts on one side, the forces which direct the soul in its transmigration, and on the other side, those which enlighten the soul between transition and a new birth. In making abstraction of all objective thoughts, the initiate is conscious of the real presence of that entity. He is aware that from it radiates the energy which leads the soul from death to a new physical existence. He perceives the force and the light which emanate from it, and he has the impression to live in it and through it. None, if not this entity itself, could express to him what it is, but that entity with which the initiate feels himself bound remains silent. However, the former activity is not to be considered as a physical representation, but as a spiritual one, and everybody knows that it has been so since time immemorial. It always has been hidden from the eyes of the ordinary mortal and became a real comprehension only by a true initiation, which was the purpose pursued by Hermes, the great initiator. The silent entity is nothing else than the deity Isis, hiding her figure to the physical sight and becoming visible to those having arrived at the stop point and looking with the true eyes which go from one birth to the other through so-called death. When the candidate had gazed for a while in profound meditation on Isis, he perceived what we may call birth or music of the spheres, the logos or the verb which pervades everything and infuses the soul into the body of those having passed through subjective life to physical rebirth. The verb represents Osiris, the son and husband of the goddess. This union, the one in three and the three in one, was the basis of the first part of the spiritual ascension of the student of the Egyptian mysteries. Therein lies the secret of immortality of the human soul, which is the seat of the ego or individuality of man across the successive lives, continuing to exist in the spiritual world between transition and rebirth. Through Osiris, the initiate had the opportunity to know himself as man in his true meaning, finding in the harmony of the spheres and the verb the explanation of the riddle of his spiritual being. After this point, which is characterized by the silence of Isis, the aspect of the initiation changes and we arrive at the Osiris initiation. Here the desire of hearing the marvelous harmony of the spheres and the logos still exists. The nostalgia of knowledge is always great in the soul, but Isis does not answer anymore. She remains silent. No Osiris can be born. No music of the spheres fills the universe. No verb explains what is still timidly manifested as the light and heat of the cosmos. The soul could but express its feeling through the words addressed to Isis. Thou contemplate thou with sorrow, tormenting thy thirst and desire of knowing, O goddess. Thou remainest this who does not understand any more herself, this who seems to fade like a flower. Thou remainest silent and mournful for the human soul. The deity expressed by a sign of unhappiness that she was unable to bring forth the music of the spheres, and the verb being deprived of the faculty of generation through the loss of Osiris, her son and husband, after being killed and torn into pieces by Typhon, has been hidden to her in the depths of the earth. Those who had gone through this initiation and returned to the physical life had a very composed but resigned appreciation of the material world. They have known Isis and felt like the widow's son. The epoch between the primitive initiation and this of Osiris coincides with the time of Moses, who was an initiate into the Egyptian mysteries. By the exodus of the Hebrews under his guidance, Moses passed over to them the secret of Osiris, abandoning to Egypt the divine mournful widow. If Moses would not have left the silent and powerless deity behind him, he would not have heard and interpreted for his people in the right sense the very significant words, "I am that which I am." Moses took with him the secret of Osiris, the verb which became that of the Hebrews, and thus the karma of ancient Egypt was realized. In conclusion, it is very important to make up one's mind of that which happened after the widowship of Isis. The Egyptian soul, notwithstanding the desire and thirst for knowledge of the spiritual world, is absolutely unable to feel happy and content. In the Zarathustrian mysteries, the initiate could hear the harmony of the spheres and see the universal light. He was happy and satisfied even in the first part of the initiation of Hermes. While in the second part with Isis, silent and sorrowful without Osiris, he felt not only abandoned and isolated, but truly the widow's son. The candidate assisted in the slow death of the deity, having brought forth the verb, which is no more. The word is lost, but will be reborn, incarnated in Jesus, the great Christian instructor, as is so beautifully symbolized by the letter Shin in the middle of the effable word or quaternary of the Hebrews. NB. With regard to the cosmic forces, please read the very recent scientific and official reports of the Professors Stearns and Overback of the University of Denver, Colorado, USA, on the power of the interstellar or cosmic rays, and even the works of another scientist, A. Compton of the University of Chicago, on the same subject. You may find there the truth of the very old teachings of the Parsis and ancient Egyptians, entirely corroborated by the mentioned men of the scientific world. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.